Hey guys, so today we're going to be doing a GS430 2000 to 2005 going into an IS200 using a manual gearbox. So let's get into it. Right, so as I said, this is a 2000 to 2005 GS430 3UZ-FE VVT-i going into an IS200 using a manual gearbox. So what we'll do first of all, as you can see, this is an adapted harness. So we've taken the original harness, completely stripped it down, removed everything it needs removing, added in what needs adding in. And what we're going to do first of all is take a look at that process and show you what goes into it. Right, so there you go. You can see what goes in the process of making one of these adapted harnesses. So for today, as usual, we're going to be doing three things. First, we're going to go through the layout of the entire harness, show you everything plugs in, where it goes, how it routes, and then we'll get into the testing with just the ignition on and obviously with the engine running as well. So to start off with the layout of the harness, let's start right here at the ECU box. So in terms of the ECU, you've got 5 connectors, 2 here that go mainly to the body, and then you've got 3 that go to the engine itself, okay? Again, all 5 of these plugs are unique, so you can't plug them in the wrong place, so don't stress about that. Obviously, this is an IS200 ECU box, and they had a rectangular shape ECU, not the wedge shape that you get on the 3UZ ones. But luckily, the IS300 did have a wedge-shaped ECU like this. So therefore, you have 2 options if you want to fit this in. Either you can get yourself an IS200 ECU box, so that's one way. The second way is you'll see there's 4 screws there, and then on this side, there and there. Take that out, you can pull the whole thing out with the PCB board for the ECU, and then you can grind off this lip that goes around here, and this will then slot directly down into there. So again, it's the right size, it's just that lip gets in the way of it sliding down. So nice and easy, 2 ways. IS200 ECU box, grind the lip off. All right, so as you can see here, we've got our interface to the IS200. So that goes to the 2 ECU plugs that are left behind when you remove your 1G FE engine from the IS200. And these plug directly into here and obviously make their way to the 3UZ ECU. Then we have our TAC converter. So on the 3UZ ECU, this actually outputs a 4-cylinder signal, not a 6 or an 8-cylinder signal. So therefore we need to convert the tacho signal to work with the 6-cylinder signal that the IS200- is looking for. And on the IS200, because only the auto version came with a 4-wire brake switch, we do fit a relay to imitate the 4-wire brake switch. So again, that just goes there and can be tucked away underneath there, okay? Then we have the body plugs. So again, we've got 1, 2, 3 body plugs here. They are all unique, so you can't get them in the wrong place, so do not stress about that. And they obviously then interface with the body of the vehicle. And then moving up here, we then have 2 little junction plugs. So these are junctioning off a bunch of connections there. So again, they can just be tucked down there as well when you insert the harness, okay? So what I'll do now is I'm gonna cut to a photo to show you what it looks like with this inside an ECU box where it's all fitted nicely and how everything tucks away. There you go. So you can see exactly what it should look like when you have it in your vehicle and everything's pushed in correctly. Okay. Right, so moving along, then we have our grommet, which slides directly into this cavity here, as you saw in the picture earlier. Moving away from there, we then have the first piece of plastic that gets bolted down to the 3UZ, and it bolts here and here with some M6 bolts, okay? And then the first section coming out there is going to be here, and that's going to go to injector 1 and coil 1. So while I'm here, just quickly looking at the engine from the front, obviously this is the left bank and that is the right bank, okay? When you're actually referring to left or right bank, you're actually looking from the back of the engine. So that's why I said it's left and right bank, and you see me backwards to say you're looking from the front, but you always do it from the back of the engine. On left bank, we have all the odd cylinders. So we have 1, 3, 5, and 7. On the right bank, we have all the even ones. So that's 2, 4, 6, and 8. Okay. So as I go through, I'll just say it's coil 1, and coil 3, coil 5, but just so you know exactly which cylinder is which. All right. So again, injector 1, coil 1, nice, simple, straightforward. Then coming to the front here, we pop out here and we go to our oil control valve. So this is what does the VVT-i on the inlet cam. Remember, these are VVT-i only on the inlet cam, not on the exhaust cam. The VVT-i on the exhaust cam came with the later engines like the UR and the GR series engines. Moving down from there, we then break out and we go to the TPS connector. Okay, so if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that on a 5-speed 3UZ, one of the ways you can tell it's a 5-speed versus a 6-speed is the fact that it's got this 4-pin TPS connector there and a single 2-wire connector over there. Okay, so that's a 5-speed. 6-speed would have one 6-pin plug down the side over here. Okay, then moving along from there, we break out again and we go to our front cam sensor. Okay, now on the 3UZ, you'll see we have 3 cam sensors. I'll go through the other 2 when we get to it, but this one is just picking up a single tooth on the cam gear. Okay, that's what this one is picking up here. So that one's used for synchronization for the ECU for fuel and spark. Then moving down from there, you'll see there's actually 2 mounting points. There's a hole there and there's a hole there. I've put a temporary clip in there. So that obviously tucks away nice and neatly there. Then moving down to here, we break out into 3 sections. First one is going to be your AC plug. So again, your AC pump would normally be here. Again, if you're not using your AC, you can just obviously tuck that away inside there. It'll keep it nice and safe down that little hole there. Then one of the ones coming off there is going to be this one, which is going to be the oil pressure switch. Now, this is an LS430 engine originally. You can tell that because the oil filter is coming forward and not backwards. And you also tell that the sump is a mid sump. Okay. So in your case, your oil pressure switch is actually pointing backwards. So that's why it breaks out here at the top. So it can come down and go around there into the oil pressure switch there. Then lastly, breaking off of here is going to come down and go to your crank sensor. So you can see the crank sensor I'm pointing out there. So again, all these plugs are different. Can't plug them into the wrong place, so do not stress about that. But that's the way it routes. You can still push the wires through there, even if you have your aircon pump in there. It is completely possible. You can kind of get your fingers inside here and obviously grab it from the top there. If you've got an AC pump, it's easy because you can see the massive hole there where it comes down. Right, so that's that. Okay, so we'll carry on and we'll move along from here. So again, plastic piece ends, carries on there, and we get to the next one. Again, 2 M6 bolts there and there. That's what bolts that down to there. Right, so first section that pops out here, this is going to be for your evap vacuum solenoid valve. So that should be on a bracket that goes over here. Obviously, as part of the remap, we remove that, so there's no need to connect it. But obviously, you are more than welcome to connect it. In this case, with an IS200, you can then connect that vacuum solenoid valve to the evaporator system that comes up from the fuel tank, and it comes up the wall there, and then you have a little sort of black filter thingy there, and it'll go into that solenoid over there. It's bolted onto the inlet manifold here, and that will then plug in there. So you can plug it in and use it, but if you don't want to, you can obviously just tuck this away. Then we're going to have injector 3 and coil 3. And then lastly, we've got our second cam sensor. So this is what we call the VVL, because this cam sensor is detecting only the inlet cam, and it is basically figuring out how many degrees of advance or retard that the engine is doing. So in other words, the ECU will command a level of advance or retard. The solenoid will then go to do that, and then that measures it to say, right, what I'm requesting is what's actually happening. So that's what this cam sensor is doing. And there's another one on the other side for the right bank as well. Okay. Moving along there, we have another breakout over here, and that's going to go to injector 5 and coil 5. And you're going to have your noise filter on here. So again, this is not how it's mounted on an original engine. Obviously, I've removed all the bracketry that was here. This will be part of the bracket that this one is connected to as well. Okay. Moving along to the back here, we're then going to have injector 7 and coil 7. So again, super straightforward. They all come out at different spots, so it's really super easy to fit it on. Then the harness comes to an end, pops down here, and we have a massive piece of plastic at the back here, and that bolts down through 2 bolts, one there and one there. Again, M6 bolts, 10mm socket is your friend when you're putting the harness on here. Okay. Right, then moving along this one over here, we then have the breakouts that come out the bottom over here. First of all, we have our earth strap. So again, that bolts there with another M6 bolt. Move my hand out of the way because it keeps going fuzzy. So that's an M6 bolt over there. And again, I always advise people to give this a bit of a clean with some emery cloth before you bolt it down. These engines love earths, and obviously everything you can do to make the earth as clean as possible, that is what you want to do. Okay. Then coming down here, we then have our Lambda sensor for bank 1. And also, while I'm here, there is a metal plate that goes here, and the connector is designed to go behind that, as that metal plate is designed to keep the heat from the exhaust away. Okay. Now, it's super important to put that back, because inside here is the same power that supplies your ECU. So if that comes loose from whichever way you've tied it down and lands on the exhaust, it melts, it'll short then a ground and the power for the sensors and your ECU, and therefore will shut the engine down, and obviously it is a pain to look for what's causing the issue. Okay, right, so just remember, metal bracket that goes in there is designed to keep the connector away from the heat of the exhaust. Then lastly, coming out the back here, we then have our gearbox harness. So this is a sub harness that you can change if you change your gearbox over there. And you'll see down here, this one is for a J160. So we've got our reverse connector there. On the other side there, we've got our speed connector. Let's see if I can get that on there. There you go, it's plugged into our little thing, so we can obviously test the speed signal later on. But that is that. So again, if you do change to like a BMW gearbox or basically any other gearbox, give us a shout and we can make you the corresponding gearbox harness to match that gearbox over there. Okay. Right, moving along over here now, and then we are back to what I call the sub harness plug that goes under the inlet. So this is for your knock sensors and your starter motor. That pops down along there and goes into this bracket, which bolts to your starter motor itself. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this is an overall picture of what it looks like under the inlet manifold. And you can see it goes down to the starter solenoid. And then it goes to knock sensor 1. And then it goes to knock sensor 2. Okay. The two catches are different colors. So please make sure you refer to this video so you know exactly which color goes on which one. So again, you can refer back. Remember, knock sensor 1 is the left bank, this side over here, and knock sensor 2 is the right bank over there. If you want an easier way to remember it, bank 1 has cylinder 1, bank 2 has cylinder 2 on it. Nice and easy to remember. Okay. Right. Then also coming out here, you then have the main power starter cable. So that goes directly onto the positive of your battery. And if you're doing one of these swaps, just remember you've got this little wire that goes down here into your fuse box. You must always remember to reconnect that, because that's obviously supplying the power to the entire vehicle. Don't connect that, nothing is going to turn on. All right. Okay, let's move around to the other side now, and we'll carry on with the rest of the harness. Just move this out the way. Right, so again, we're just moving along here. We have another breakout down here, sticking out of the bottom here, and that's going to be your second earth strap. Again, M10 bolt, that's going to go straight in, sorry, M6 bolt, straight inside there. And then we have our accelerator pedal sub harness. Okay, so again, this is obviously to keep the pedal harness inside the vehicle. And you can see it goes along through here. And in this case, we're using an IS220-250 accelerator pedal. All right. Now, normally, obviously, that would go through this hole where your original accelerator bracket was for your cable. So again, you remove your accelerator cable and that pedal, and then you replace it with this pedal over here. Okay, I do have a video on pedals if you want to go through that to show you what kind of pedals you can use. This isn't the only one you can use. There are plenty of other options available. This is obviously easily available for me here in the UK. All right. Now, moving along from there, we then come to the end of the piece of plastic and we go to injector 8 and coil 8. Nice and straightforward. Moving along there, we then have the next breakout, and that's going to be injector 6 and coil 6. And also coming out there is the connector for your ACIS vacuum solenoid. You'll see the wire runs down here, goes underneath the intake. Now then, because you've got to take off the intake to do the starter and knock harness, that's a really good time to test this vacuum solenoid valve, okay? Now, when you pull the intake off, you'll see there's a big black canister that holds vacuum, etc., and you'll see the valve is kind of towards the front over there, okay? I do actually have a video showing you the entire ACIS system and how it works. If you're interested in that, there'll be a link down below in the description for you guys. But for your testing purposes, just remember on your harness that the thick white wire is 12 volts and the blue with a white tracer wire, that is the negative. The reason I point that out is because that vacuum solenoid valve is polarity sensitive. It'll only work if you connect positive and negative in the correct way, okay? So for example, in this case, I can see the white one goes to the black one on that side and the blue one goes to the white one on that side. So I know I would need to connect 12 volts to black and ground to white, and I should be able to, if I tap that power, I should hear that vacuum solenoid valve click. If you don't hear that vacuum solenoid valve click, now's the time to replace that, because obviously getting everything in the vehicle, finding out your ACIS system doesn't work, then having to remove the entire intake and everything again to change that is less than ideal. Okay, moving along here, you'll see there's two mounting points for the harness there and there. So you can use P-clips or whatever tickles your fancy there. But this breakout over here is going to go to the cam sensor for the left bank. So again, this is the opposite one from the one on the, sorry, this is the one for the right bank. This is the same as the one on the left bank that we went through earlier. Again, only measuring the actual cam shaft itself, and there's 3 teeth on here so it can gauge position, okay? We then have injector 4 and coil 4. And lastly, we have our noise filter on here. Again, there is a bracket on here that holds the cover on top. That's what this goes on to. This doesn't actually bolt on where I've bolted on. I've just bolted on there because it's good enough. It just needs an earth through the back here, okay? Moving to the front here, we're gonna have a big breakout section over here, so let's get started with it. We've got injector 2 and coil 2, nice and easy. We then have oil control valve for the right bank, so that's on there. We then have our coolant temperature sensor there. And don't forget, if you have a 3UZ, you do not have a coolant temperature sensor here. I've added this in. You actually just have a blanking bolt over there, okay? And then we have our drive-by-wire motor plug. So that goes directly into there, nice and simple. And then we have our mass airflow meter connector that goes in over there, okay? If you guys ever want to know what mass airflow meter you should have for your vehicle, the easiest way to do it is by far taking your ECU, because remember it's ECU dependent. So example, the GS, the SC, and the LS430, I think all the pins, if they're 5-speed, are in the same location. But obviously they have different mass airflow meters. So the best way to do it is effectively take your ECU, get your part number, go to Toyota DIY, put your part number in, which will then bring to your vehicle, and then you're going to go to the air cleaner section, and that's where you're going to find the part number for your mass airflow meter, okay? So that's a really nice, easy way to find parts, a correct part for this particular setup. Then moving along down here, and we're going to come down by the alternator, and then we break out into 3 sections. One being your alternator plug, which is right there. Second one being your Lambda sensor for the right bank, so that goes in there. And a quick note, you'll notice that this Lambda sensor on a 3UZ is a really long wire, and the other side it's a really short wire. If you take a look at the 1UZ VVT-i, they're both very short wires, and this is actually a difference between the two of them. The wiring in this long one versus the short one is different. So you can't just use 2 long ones, or you can't use 2 short ones because this one won't reach, obviously. So yeah, just make sure you get the correct one. I do have a listing in the description of literally all the part numbers for most of the things you guys need to replace. So again, you can refer down to that and grab your part number from there. Then lastly, we have our oil level sensor. Now, for the IS200 300 Altezza swaps, you need the front sump. So that's why the oil level sensor is on this side. On the mid sump, it's actually on the other side of the engine down there by the Lambda sensor, okay? So that's that. All right, so then lastly, other things you need to connect is going to be your alternator main positive. So that's this one over here. Now in this case, that will go down. Preferably you're going to run it along your subframe. It's going to pop up on this side and it's going to bolt directly onto there, okay? I always advise to do that, mainly because this 120 amp fuse is for the alternator. So if anything happens to that wire underneath the vehicle, if it shorts or anything like that, it is obviously going to blow this fuse and therefore save your vehicle, save your battery, save everything inside the car. So again, I highly advise to put the alternator there and not directly to the battery, because if anything happens, obviously that fuse will pop and then it makes everything safe. You can come along, fix the wire, replace the fuse, everybody's happy. Okay. We've obviously already been through the main starter cable that goes directly to the positive of your battery. You've obviously got the cable underneath there that goes to your fuse box there, and that also goes to the positive of the battery. And it is actually designed this way, so you can see the standard Toyota has a longer section over here and a shorter section over there. This is how they're designed to do, to actually go one on top of each other, because you already have one terminal on your positive of your battery on your IS200. All right, right then, earths. So you have the earth from the battery, which goes down. That's this cable over here, bolts to your chassis, and it'll go down and it'll bolt to your block. Okay, so obviously that is the main earth for the engine, because it bolts to the block. It's what your starter motor earths through and everything. Okay, now then, obviously on the IS200, you might deem it a little bit thin, so you might want to replace this with a thicker cable. That's totally up to you. But obviously you can also take another cable from there and bolt it onto the underneath the battery tray where it bolts onto the chassis, and then that will give you extra thickness on the cable if you decide you want to do that. Other earths that you can attach. Number one, on your gearbox, when you took your original engine out, you would have seen there was basically what I call an earth braid. So it's got no insulation or anything on, just two rings, a piece of flat braid in between them, and it goes on one of the gearbox bolts and it goes to the chassis leg underneath the vehicle. You could definitely put that one back. I would advise that. Again, the more earths, the better. Then on your firewall here, you actually had an earthing point down here. That obviously carried your brake vacuum pipe that went to your boost solenoid. Into that section, came out here, went along a metal pipe there, and you had an earthing point there. That you can then take to the cylinder head. Now on the cylinder head, you've got the M6 bolts that go for that one. You also have an M8 bolt hole that goes there. It is threaded on a 3UZ, as you can see here. So you can put an earth from there to the firewall, absolutely no problem at all. So as a bare minimum, I would advise effectively earth to the block, beef it up if you want to. Main earth from the, earth from the gearbox bolt to the chassis leg, and then one from the cylinder head to the firewall, okay? Now, obviously, these are what we call MLS head gaskets, or metal line sleeve gaskets. So again, the head to the block in terms of earthing is very good because the gaskets is actually metal. Just remember, on the 1UZ non-VVT-i, they are composite gaskets. So again, the actual earthing from the cylinder head to the block is not as great as on a VVT-i, either 1 or 3UZ, okay? So again, that's something to think about if you've got a 1UZ non-VVT-i. Make sure you do put an earth from the cylinder heads to the firewall. That'll then make sure that everything runs smoothly, because those engines also earth through the cylinder head over there. Okay. Right, so I think we've covered everything there. We've got main power for your starter. You're going to have power for the fuse box. You're going to have earth from the block, earth from the gearbox, earth to the firewall to the cylinder head. You know about the alternator main power that goes in over there, and obviously the harness, as you can see, it is really easy to fit. You basically drop it on top of the engine, you start screwing down all the plastics, and then you can go around and plug everything in. Obviously this goes in your box, put the lid back on, tighten that down, and everything is ready to go. Okay. Right, so that is the layout of the harness. So hopefully I've explained everything in detail there for you guys. So what we're going to do now is cut away, and we're going to come back and we're going to be doing the testing of the engine harness. So see you in a second. Right, so now we're back for the testing of the engine harness, and as I said, it's going to be two sections, one with just the ignition on and one with the engine running. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the tests that we're going to carry out, explain why we do them, etc., and then we'll jump in and carry on the testing with the ignition on. So ignition on testing over here. First of all, we have immobilizer removal. So with the GS, obviously it has all the wiring so we can display the security light. So yes, the immobilizer is removed, but the security light still flashes. What we're going to do is we're going to insert the key. We're not even going to turn it on. We're just going to insert the key and the security light should go on. Now, if you want to know how that works, etc., I think I've done a couple of videos on the immobilizer systems and how they work and what to look for, etc. So again, if you go and find that video, it'll give you a much better explanation as to how it works. Okay. Next up is going to be ambient temperature, or outside temperature, if you want to call it that. So we're going to pop over here. We're going to check this over here and make sure that we can see the outside temp on there. In this case, it is actually being fed data to the engine ECU. And the remap changes all the MPX data, so then it actually transmits that outside temperature to the car, which then displays on the cluster there, okay? Then we're going to go over to the cluster and we're going to look at check engine light, charge light, and oil pressure. So we've got check engine light at the top here, we've got oil and battery light down there, so I want to make sure that those work correctly. Then we are going to do reverse and speedo. So in this case, I've got my little connector here, all right? And we're going to plug that into the reverse plug, which is over here. All right, and then we are going to test the reverse, so we should hear the beeping on here. So I know from this connector all the way inside the vehicle, the reverse circuit is 100% connected correctly. Then for the speedo, we're going to use our little tacho device, which we can use a test output signal. We're going to feed it to the speed sensor, which is over here, labeled as speed, as you can see there. Or maybe you can, maybe you can't. Anyway, so that is the speed sensor over there. This is a Hall effect style sensor, so you've got 12 volts, ground, and the signal coming out of there. And so that will then plug into here, and then we'll actually see a speed come up on the dash. Just a quick note for you guys, when you are fitting it into the vehicle, if you ever get it all fitted in and you don't get a speed signal, because obviously you'll see I'm going to test it now, so I know it works 100%. So if you don't get a speed signal, the quick, easy way to test it without having to purchase anything is basically if you can get the car up on jack stands or on a ramp, and then basically what you can do is unplug or unbolt the speed sensor, basically tape the drill to the end of the speed sensor, the gear, get your friend to sit inside the car, turn the ignition on, and then spin the drill. If you get speed showing up on the dash, then it means there's something wrong inside the gearbox that's not turning that particular gear, okay? If you do that and you don't get speed on the inside, then obviously there's another problem elsewhere, so you can start looking for things like power supplies, etc. The power supply for the speed sensor is the same one as for the cluster, so usually if they go together, but the whole cluster will go down as well, okay? Right, so that's reverse and speedo. Then we're going to do OBD2 test. So basically, because it's a plug-and-play setup, it plugs directly into the OBD2 port in the driver's footwell of the vehicle. Nothing special there. Unlike the 6-speed versions that have cans, we've actually put another OBD2 plug inside the ECU box for you to communicate with. Obviously, with it not being a CAN-compatible vehicle, you just don't have the wiring inside the vehicle to do it. Next up, we're going to do AC clutch and AC request. So AC clutch, we're going to head over to GTS. That I'm going to then basically output the signal from the ECU to turn on the AC magnetic clutch relay. And all we're going to be listening for is the relay click. So inside this little fuse box, that one over there is the AC magnetic clutch relay. So when I output from the ECU, we should hear that click. That's what we're going to be looking for there. That tells me then that the ECU is capable of then turning on the AC clutch. And AC request, because AC request is done via multiplex or MPX. So what I'm going to basically be doing is we will look at the live data on GTS. We're going to then press the AC button, and you will then see it go from off to on and then on to off when I press it again, okay? Also, just a side note, the AC button does also activate idle up. That's part of the remap as well. So again, that all works completely as standard. In terms of the AC, obviously you need to have everything connected. You need it to be gassed up. It does have a pressure switch, so if the pressure is too low or too high, it will not work, okay? So again, just make sure that all of that is correct before you test the AC. And then lastly, brake switch. Again, because I've added something into the harness to replicate the brake switch that would normally be there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed the brake wire 12 volts, which is what would happen if you press the brakes in the standard IS200. You're then going to hear the relay click, but we're also going to look at live data on here, and it's going to tell us that the brake switch has gone from off to on, and then I'll cut the 12 volts and it'll go from on to off again, okay? So that's all the testing with the ignition on. So you can see I don't do it with the engine running because there's no need for that. And then lastly, engine running, starter circuit. What I basically mean by that is I'm going to put the key in the ignition and I'm going to turn to start it. If it starts, then I know all the wiring for the start circuit is 100% correct and working, okay? Then we're going to do ACIS. So what we're going to be looking for is this little valve on the back of the engine. A few seconds after it starts up, it goes like that, okay? So we'll start it, and then sometimes you see it in the background. So if I've got the key here and I'm busy starting it, you can actually see a little valve in the background, and you'll actually see it go down. But all we're going to look for is it's in the down position. That tells me that it's working correctly. Drive-by-wire test, well, that's super simple. We're basically just going to rev the engine with the accelerator pedal. As long as that works, we're happy with that. Oil control valve test, okay? So basically what that is we use GTS and we do bank 1 and then we do bank 2, and effectively you'll see the test what it does, but it basically advances and retards the cam, so it sounds like a lumpy cam engine for a second until I cancel the test, and then it goes back to running normal again, okay? Injectors and coils. So basically what I've done is I actually haven't plugged in all of the injectors fully, so I can just basically pick them up with my 2 fingers there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the engine. I'm going to go one injector by one. I'm going to lift it off and you can hear the engine misfire, and I'll put it back on again, and then you'll hear that it's running. So I know that all 8 cylinders are running correctly, okay? I don't disconnect the coils because on a 3UZ with the coils, what happens is if it picks up in the ECU that there's an error with the coil and it's not firing, it shuts off the corresponding injector. So you're not pumping fuel into a cylinder that's not firing, okay, which is quite good. So obviously if I remove injector one by one, again, it'll just go until there's no more cylinders left to fire because we'll keep shutting off the injectors. And then tacho. So again, I'll just come over here. We'll give the engine a rev so you can see the tacho or rev counter working. Now, I do calibrate it here on my side. I try and get it as close as I possibly can. But again, that little device, the tacho device, is adjustable. So again, once you're in the car and you're sitting, because again, I'm kind of working on this, and unfortunately, it's not always the best angle. So I get it as close as I possibly can, but you guys can fine tune it if you want. Obviously, you'll need something like this to get the live data through to see the engine RPM, to obviously make sure that you are correct, okay? Right, so that's the tacho. Then coolant temperature. Again, this is one of the things that are transmitted via MPX. So I want to make sure that the coolant temperature is working. So all we're going to do is come over here and have a look there. And because the engine's been running for a little while, what I normally do is at the very beginning before I start, I say, look, there's the coolant temperature. Then we finish all the tests, come back again. It's usually risen up from where it was. So I try and get it to about sort of 40, 50 degrees because that's where the needle starts moving. After we've run it for a bit, you'll see it goes further up. So I know that it is actually just going up and it's not just going to a particular point and staying there. Obviously, I test everything off camera to make sure it gets the temperature and so on. And then diagnostics. So we'll go through the diagnostics, how you do them, what you can do, etc., at the end. Okay. So let's jump in with the ignition on testing. So first thing again is the immobilizer removal. So as I said, all I'm basically going to do is take the key. You can see the security light is flashing. See if I can get both in at the same time. And as I insert the key, some of you might have heard the relay click there. Again, if you watch the video on the immobilizer system, it sort of explains in great detail what it does. Or you can watch one of my videos where I've had a harness where the customer wanted to keep the immobilizer. I think I go into detail on some of those as well. But security light goes off. Brilliant. Now, obviously, this is not the key that came with the ECU. The immobilizer is actually removed, but it's a really nice feature because if someone's walking past your car, they'll see the security lights flashing. They'll think there's an immobilizer and they might move on to another vehicle that doesn't have that sort of feature on it. Okay. Next up, ambient temp. So we're going to turn the ignition on. And then we're going to see over here, 23 degrees. So again, that is the outside temperature being measured by the vehicle. And like I said, it is actually measured, so it will go up and down as it gets colder and warmer. Okay. Check engine light, charge light, and oil pressure. So over here we have check engine light, charge light, and oil pressure. Okay. You will have a low oil level light there as well. I remove it because I do lots of engines, especially Japanese ones that don't do oil level. But obviously that does work as long as you plug it in over there as well. Okay. Then let's do reverse and speedo. So again, this is nice and simple. I'm just going to take my little plug here and basically bridge it over there. There you go. So you can hear the annoying beep on there. So that tells me from here all the way inside the vehicle, the wiring is 100% correct. That's always why I test it here, because I'm even testing the crimps on the wiring to make sure they are correct and working as well. Right, so speedo. Right, we've got everything already set up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to try and hold the phone there, and I'm going to insert it, and then you should see the speedo climb up as I do that. So let's get that right. There you go. Oh, sorry about that. There you go. So you can see, obviously, my little device is on. So I'm testing basically power and ground as well at the connector. So I'm making sure all of that works. And you can see we've got speed over there. If I then just disconnect it, there you go. So the speed goes away. So that's fantastic. All right. Right, so let's go OBD2 test. So basically, I've already plugged in here before. So I'm just going to hit retry. And I'm just going to get rid of tons of data that takes ages to load. And there you go. You can see we've got 56 degrees of coolant temperature. So you should actually see the coolant temp gauge has come off the needle there. So that's perfect. Okay. And obviously we can see the stop light switch and the AC signal as well, which we're going to go through next. So first of all, we've got AC clutch. I'm actually going to jump AC clutch. I'm going to go into AC request and brake switch first because I'm on the correct screen for that. So let's go into, what are we going to do first? We're going to do AC request or AC signal. So currently you can see it is off. Let's go press the AC button. Lights up orange. And you can see that's now changed to on. Turn it off. And now that is off. Fantastic. All right, so next up we're going to do stop light switch. Let's get rid of that. So at the moment, you can see stop light switch is currently off. Let's go over here and we are going to feed a 12 volts to our original brake switch. Hopefully you heard the relay click as well there. And then you can see there, stop light switch is now on. And then let's go and remove that wire. There you go. And stop light switch is now off again. Fantastic, brilliant. Okay, so now we're gonna go and we're gonna do the AC signal. So again, I'm going into active test that I can carry out on the ECU, and you'll see down there we have AC magnetic clutch relay. And we're gonna pop down there and go into the test. Right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna quickly move the phone over there, so hopefully you can hear the relay click. Okay, it did click about 3 times. Hopefully you did hear that. Okay. Let's go back into data list. Okay, so that is pretty much all the testing with the ignition on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop off, get some ear defenders and so on. We're going to pop straight back and then we're going to test with the engine running. So see you in a second. Right, so back with the engine running now. I've got my ear defenders on, so let's rock and roll. So I'm going to do a quick recap of what we're going to do. Really nice and simple. So start a circuit, just make sure it starts on the key. That's all I want to know. ACIS, valve going down. Drive-by-wire, rev the engine. Oil control valve, test bank 1 and bank 2 on there. Injectors and coils, go around and unplug each injector one by one. Tacho, come back and give it a rev. Coolant temperature, so we want to see if that rises up. Remember, it's about 56 degrees already. And then obviously we'll come back and we'll talk about the diagnostics. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we'll grab the key. Fantastic, so that's the starter circuit, ACIS. See, that's down, brilliant, okay. Whoopsie daisy, hang on a second. There you go. Okay. Right, so that's drive-by-wire test. Let's do oil control valve tests. Gonna go to active test. We've got bank 1. Bank 2. Brilliant. Okay, so that's injectors and coils. Right, so let's nip around here. So we'll start at number 8, number 6, number 4, number 2, go over to the other side, number 7, number 5, number 3, let's see if I can do it nice on here, number 1, brilliant, so that's every single cylinder misfire in as I unplug it. Let's go over to tacho. Fantastic. Alright, the coolant temperature. That's definitely gone up. And as you can see here, we're now on 68 degrees, so that is fantastic. Alright. Okay. Right, so I'm just going to put the ear defenders down quickly. Okay. Actually, let me just quickly run the fuel out quickly. Fantastic. So I just want to run the fuel out the engine because I've got to disconnect it after we finish here. Right, so diagnostics, what can you do? Right, with the European and the US 3UZs, the only way to get diagnostic codes out of the ECU is via OBD2, okay? Unlike the European 1UZ and Japanese 1UZ and the Japanese 3UZ, unfortunately, you cannot do what I call the old school system of flashing the codes. So basically what you could do in the past is you could basically bridge 2 pins on here, TC and ground, and that would effectively give you a diagnostic mode, right? There's all types of weird things which I'll explain in a second area, because you can use it on a 3UZ, you just can't get codes out. But I've made something like this where I bought it cheap on eBay, I've soldered the 2 wires together. If I plug that in there, it puts it into diagnostic mode, okay? The check engine light will not flash to give you the codes, unfortunately, but what it will do is, because it puts the ECU into diagnostic mode, it does actually lock your timing at 10 degrees. So if you have a sneaking suspicion that your timing is out, and you want to check very quickly, if like me, you've got a timing light where you can just literally wrap the clamp around the wires and it will actually give you a flashing light, which mine does. Then obviously you can then check the timing. It locks at 10 degrees, so you can see where I've marked it up nicely. You've got 0, 5, 10, and 15 degrees. And on your crank pulley, hopefully you can see it inside there, I've used some white Tipex paint correction fluid, whatever you want to call it. And obviously I've marked that up nice so you can see that when a light's flashing, okay? So it's a quick, easy way to check your timing without obviously having to remove all the covers and physically check the marks on the engine itself. Because sometimes it's not that easy. If it's inside a vehicle, it might not be easy to remove all the covers and everything and make sure everything is correct. So chucking a timing light on it, bridging those 2 pins, and then obviously getting in a diagnostic mode, you can tell straight away, yes, it is at 10 degrees. Clearly, don't leave that in there, because if you do, it'll lock it at 10 degrees of timing and your engine's going to feel very, very underpowered. Okay. Right, so that is the diagnostics that you can do on there. So just to recap, you can only get the codes via OBD, okay? You can see when the engine is running, the check engine light does go off, okay? The check engine light will operate exactly as it does with a standard vehicle. So if it comes on, there is a problem that needs to be resolved, all right? Now then, as part of the remap, we've obviously removed the entire automatic gearbox, so you're going to get absolutely no codes for the automatic gearbox. You're also going to get no codes for secondary Lambda sensors, or the ones that go after the cats, okay? So you can see, we haven't even given any wiring or anything for them. They do not need to be fitted to the vehicle. You basically, and you will never get a code for them, okay? All right. However, if you want to do that little thing where I said you can bridge the pins over, but basically all that's useful for in a 3UZ European or US is obviously to lock the timing at 10 degrees to give you a quick little check, and then you can make sure that your timing's correct. If it's not, you can pull the covers off and then you can actually see where the problem lies. Okay. All right, so guys, that is pretty much it. Obviously, hopefully it's helpful and informative for you guys. You can see exactly how the harness goes on. You go see all the testing we go through. Obviously in the background, I obviously let it run up to temperature and so on and so forth, which is why I have fans and everything on to make sure that everything works correctly as it should. Okay. Right, so that's this done. So let's get this off and get it to the customer. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them down below. You can also email us at info@phoenixenginemanagement.com. We do have a Facebook page, but that'll just give you all the response now to email us. I'm trying to get all communications in one place so that I can obviously answer you guys as quickly as I possibly can. Okay. Right, so that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.